We are live. Dum 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 dum. Let's make sure audio's good. Audio's good. We're here. I am Zach here with the voice of college football, Missouri Tigers Live, episode 14. Holy cow, 14 episodes. We are in the thralls of the off season, folks. Is what it is. It's the time we reach this time every year, and it is not fun. We're starting to see some clips from spring practice. Missouri has announced they're not going to do a spring game. So for all of us that do, analyzing and watching and reporting on this stuff, Eli and the boys have made our lives a little bit harder. So I did see them doing Tiger Jacks, and it looks like our boy Bo was leading the way. But like no spring, okay, they're disguising it as we don't want like our players getting poached. And yeah, no. They're disguising it as because there's construction going on to Faroe, and they're disguising it as like we don't want like people to be risk injury. With all the construction going around Memorial Stadium. Yeah, okay. No, you don't want your players getting poached. You're just not going to be honest about it, which is fine. Like because like Lincoln Riley announced it and he's getting torched. But like let's be serious. We know why you're not doing it. It's okay. You're making my life a little bit harder when I'm trying to report on the team. I will add though, like Mizzou spring games never really been a thing. It's not a day. It's not the spring game at Ohio State. Like it's never been a thing that's going to sell out the stadium or even come close. It's just kind of something nice that you can bring like your kids to, and they can meet the players. And like Mizzou canceling their spring game isn't quite the same as like Alabama or Georgia or like in Oklahoma canceling their spring game. It's just kind of is what it is. Like I'm not upset about it. I mean, I would like to kind of see what maybe this offense could look like. I know in an abbreviated term, obviously it's not going to be the full experience, but I would like to see kind of what it looks like before we get to summer practice. But that's just not going to happen, unfortunately, because the Missouri Tigers have decided to cancel their spring game. It does not look like Kirby Moore will be leaving, so it looks like Mizzou will return both its coordinators. Remains to be seen if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Continuity, I think, is a good thing. We saw Blake Baker's defense take a big step up in year 2, even though it was pretty good in year 1. Whereas I'm not still sure about Corey Batoon's defense, but continuity is a good thing. So what do we get now? Like where is this going to go now for this Missouri channel? So what are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to talk about recruiting. You're hearing a lot of kids put out top 5, top 10 lists. Look, folks, recruiting is important, and Eli's done a really nice job since he's been here. I follow that stuff. I like seeing, people's top 5s. I like seeing that we're in Jackson Cantwell's top 8 or top 6 or whatever it was. Ultimately, I don't care. When it's time for like official seasons and people are taking their official visits, their senior year of high school, that stuff I care about. The order, like who gets the last draw, who gets the first draw. That's the stuff I care about. And I know there are people finalizing visits. But a lot of me doesn't care like, oh, Mizzou's in the top 8 for this other kid. Because for so long, we've seen Mizzou make the top 8 for kids. And it's like, yeah, Mizzou's in the top 8. Great. Who else in the top 8? Oh, Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, Florida, Oklahoma, until recently, Texas. But the bigger thing we've got coming up, and it's not too far away, as my next show will be in March. Spring transfer portal. I don't think Mizzou's done in the portal. I think there's a couple moves left to make on the offensive line and maybe at D tackle. They're telling everybody they're happy with what they got there. Of course they are. They're not going to not say they are. But I think there's some room to grow there. So we'll see. It will be interesting for what they do moving forward. Go ahead and like and subscribe to this video. Guys, the Voice of College Football isn't going anywhere. Any team, if you're a fan of any team, we probably have a channel for you. If you're a fan of a team with any kind of rep, shout out to Mizzou for winning 21 games in the last 2 years. Been a lot of fun. We have a channel for you. We have opportunities. Follow. We're on the way up, guys, and Mark and TJ and all these guys are doing an amazing job of corralling everything and making sure that we're on the way up and the momentum's not stopping. Go ahead and hit that like button. There is no offseason in college football. Sure, I like revisiting things in college football, but like there's news even today from Mizzou, like about the no spring game or this week. There just is. Hit that like button, subscribe. Also, as I said, we're not going anywhere. Get your business, product, service, or personal brand to the next level by partnering with us here at the Voice of College Football, as I will show you how. Let's discuss how you can reach your target market. Check out the experience of one of our current partners. We are here to deliver it for you. Contact us at sponsorships at VOCFB, Voice of College Football.com today. Guys, just do it. If you have business, you want to take, if you have any interest in sports or you want to reach a wide audience, we're here for you. Contact Mark, contact us, anyone at the channel, and we will do what we can to help you. Not my best reading. I was a PA announcer in college. I've been better at that. So, because there's no spring game, because there's no real recruiting on, we're kind of going down nostalgia lane here. And I love nostalgia lane. I like talking about old Missouri teams because I have a lot of knowledge in my head about these old Missouri teams. And, I like talking about it and using that for once. So, again, this is post-2006. So after the 2006 season, the year Florida beat Ohio State in the national championship. My first year of college football, I will reiterate, was 2007. The best season in college football history. Biggest wins for the Missouri Tigers post-2007. So post-2006. I should have said since 2007. That would make more sense. I think Mizzou's got a lot of big ones, man. And I'm hoping some people in the chat come in and comment with their ideas, with their thoughts, because what may be a big win to you? There's obvious ones. And the biggest win Mizzou's had since the start of 2007, Kansas 2007. I mean, Jayhawks are number 2, undefeated. Mizzou's number 4 with 1 loss on the road in Norman. Can't fault you there. And 2 teams coming in with a winner. It was basically a college football quarterfinal. Winner had a chance to go play for a natty. Loser, was going to get a BCS bowl because KU did, and they won that game to their credit. But Mizzou went up big, and then Kansas crawled back. Full credit to Kansas for coming back in that game when they were, to use a Oklahoma reporter term, dead in the water. They came back, there's the safety, that's the big thing. But, they were down 6 with the ball at the 3-yard line. Highly improbable they would have, because they had a minute left. But they still had the ball. Credit to them for that. But Mizzou was just awesome that day. It was Chase Daniel's shining moment in Arrowhead. College game day was there. All the eyes were on the Missouri Tigers and the Kansas Jayhawks. That doesn't happen. That hasn't happened since, really. Mizzou's had big night games before, and we'll talk about more of those. But the college football world was focused on Missouri and Kansas. You had a Heisman Trophy winner, or trophy candidate at Mizzou. You had a Kansas team that was undefeated, and that's never happening again. And not the Heisman part. I hope the Heisman part happens, but the Kansas undefeated. And the world's eyes, the college football world's eyes were on the Missouri Tigers. And it's just something and they came up and they won the game. We're never going to see that again. And it was an amazing thing. Other big wins that really come to mind as I'm going in sequential order of years. Like I'm just trying to think of the biggest win of every year. 2008, there was a lot of fun wins, but not a lot of like huge monumental wins. Same thing with 2009. 2010, you had the win over OU. Homecoming, Gary had a weird habit of scheduling like big games for homecoming. Not a lot of schools do that just because like at Mizzou, when Mizzou's good, like Oklahoma at that time was going to be sold out. Texas was going to be sold out. Whoever these teams are. So usually you waste homecoming on like Kentucky, like they did in 2012, or like Idaho. I think was it 1 year. I think Memphis was a different year. This past year it was Auburn. Usually you put it on like a you're going to win game, because it's homecoming and you want the people to celebrate. But Gary liked he played South Carolina in 2013. He liked, and I believe it was Vanderbilt in 2014, which when that's scheduled, Vanderbilt was like coming off 2 9-win seasons. It wasn't like it was a joke of a game. Like when that game was scheduled, like they announced homecoming a year in advance because schedules used to be a little bit longer known. And it was announced it was going to be Vanderbilt. So, they were coming off 2 9-win seasons. They still had James Franklin. He hadn't left for Penn State yet. But then he left, obviously, and Derek Mason came in. But, yeah, so they come in and return the opening kick for the kickoff, or the opening kickoff for a touchdown. Blaine Gabbert plays a fantastic football game. The Mizzou offensive line is getting pushed against OU, which was a huge problem in 2007 and 2008. They were physically matching OU. They were making plays. They were making kicks. It was just a wonderful, again, College Game Day was there. It was just a wonderful night to be a Missouri Tiger. It's not the second biggest win. We'll talk about it. I think it was the second biggest win of this era. But it was a night, they rushed the field. It's a night Mizzou fans will never forget. Like, they finally got OU. Finally got them. It was just a really fun night, a really fun atmosphere. And unfortunately, we'll talk about toughest losses here in a little bit. But spoiler alert for my next segment. 2011 had some fun moments, no real huge wins. 2012, same thing. 2013, you could argue for like 5 games. You could argue going on the road and beating Georgia. Georgia, I know, was down Keith Marshall and Todd Gurley. And I think they were missing some starters on defense. I don't recall exactly who, but it sounds right. And not in like a Steve Spurrier joking about Georgia way. I think they got hurt. But they went in there and they went up 28-7 or 28-10. Georgia crawls back. It's 28-26. They throw the double pass, Matty Mock over to Bud Sasser, who chucks it in the end zone for LaDainian Washington. Touchdown Tigers. They go up, and then Henry Josie runs one in. And then I think Baggett missed the extra point, which kept it a one-possession game, which was really interesting. And then Randy Ponder picked off Aaron Murray. He ended Georgia's season, which was really cool at the time. And you put yourself in prime position for the SEC East. And then, that was really fun. And then beating A&M, that game was interesting. I was at that game. They came out and they stunk. The moment was too big, which happens often for Missouri teams. Like you see it a lot with Mizzou football and Mizzou basketball. They go into these games and sometimes I'm thinking of like for basketball, I'm thinking Kansas in 2022. Like that sometimes even at home, the moment is just too big. But they went out there and they stunk, but the defense played well enough against Johnny Manziel. And again, I think Manziel was hurt. I think he was dealing with like an injured wrist. And that guy battled that night. I mean, he was older than me. He was still older than me, but he battled that night. And Mizzou defense kind of kept him in the game. And it was an A&M team that already lost 3 games. I think they had just gotten shellacked by LSU the week before. So it was a game Mizzou should have won. Marcus Murphy tied it pretty early in the third quarter. LaDainian Washington made an amazing catch on a fade ball from Franklin. And then Henry Josie, 57 yards of glory. And, Mizzou wins, storm the field. That was fun. I was there. I got to find a way to import some of these videos that I took when I was a kid. not kid, I was in high school, but that game, despite how miserable it was, because like it wasn't fun, man. Like A&M wasn't like a top 10 game where it was just a crazy back and forth. It was like, we should win this game. And I'm in the stands and you can just kind of feel like the nervous energy coming through that crowd the entire game. I'm trying to think 2004, and then the Cotton Bowl against Oklahoma State. James Franklin played horribly. Matty Mock was pretty good for a couple drives. Actually, no, it was the one drive he threw the ball to Marcus Lucas in the corner. He had really good rapport with Marcus Lucas now that I'm thinking about it. Where Franklin just didn't that year. But, Henry Josie was great. The ground game was really good. The defense scored a touchdown to end it. And they beat a top 10 Oklahoma State team in the Cotton Bowl. And, I got rated last week. I think that's the best team Mizzou's had. Just because they had NFL linemen on both sides of the ball. They had great wide receivers. They had a really great quarterback, a really good quarterback. Chase was better in 2007. They had great receiving cores, good running games. I think 13's defense was better. Like 2014, I'm not going to do this year by year. I'm just thinking of like I'm bringing up games in order. Because if I had to rank them, KU's number one, always and forever will be number one. Number two to me is A&M, just because you lost that game. South Carolina was going to make the SEC championship game. And while great, Mizzou, you went 10-2, you really didn't have anything to show for it. It was just like, and you blew your chance at the SEC East. 2014 beating Arkansas, that was a game Arkansas team. They got better in the second half of the year. Brett Bielema was in year 2 as a coach there. Bert's obviously a very good coach. They were down 14-0 pretty quickly. They were down 14-6. Entering half, Andrew Baggett made 250 plus yards. I was at this game too. And they just kind of whittled their way back into it in the fourth quarter with some bombs from Matty Mock and some bombs and some really nice play calls by Josh Heupel. And then the offensive line took over. Russell Hansbrough, Marcus Murphy were just pounding the ball down the field, and they scored. Murphy spun it in from 12 yards out. And then, it was just a great time. They won 21-14. And then you get into the really lean years. Like, there was no big wins in 2005. 2016, you didn't win anything. 2017, there were no, you beat a bunch of crappy teams. Like, it was fun, and you beat the tar out of some crappy teams. 2018, I want to say Florida, but, how big is a win that in a season you're 8-5? 2019, no. 20, no. In these mediocre seasons, it's hard to establish huge wins. I mean, that's what I was going to do, a top 10 list, but I'm how? I mean, it's just kind of sad to be beating Arkansas and 3-7 Arkansas in 2020, or beating up on, who cares? South Carolina in 2022. Maybe that South Carolina game is bigger in hindsight, just because it kind of showed what was going to come in 23. But 23. Tennessee, that game, that was the game where I think everybody went, oh, okay, Eli can go. Eli's a guy. And I know Tennessee fans hate him, and I understand it. I don't blame them for that. But man, you just lost to Georgia. You'd already lost to LSU. So let's just be honest. And you beat Kansas State, but you lost to the two good SEC teams you had played. You get Tennessee at home. Tennessee's good, not great. They're very beatable. They're good, not great. And you housed them. You just beat the crap out of them. Physically, mentally, you just destroyed. It was very cathartic after they had kind of kicked your ass for a couple of years there. It was just a lot of fun. I didn't get to go to that game, unfortunately, but it was a CBS game. And it kind of showed okay, no, you're a good team, and Eli can coach. And we'll see what happens moving forward. But that was the game, and I know they were 7-2 at that time, but I think that was the game going into the game where everyone was like, oh, we got a guy. Because if you lose that, you're 7-3, and it's 9-3 is good. But at that point, you're just, you're Dan Mullen, Mississippi State at 9-3, which is still good, and it's a good season for Missouri. But, man, 10-2, that was just so super fun. And then beating Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. I mean, we've rehashed that game to bits, and then in 24 the OU win just because of everything, like what bringing that game back means to both fan bases, and just kind of how nasty it got online. I didn't help with that. Just how nasty it got between the two fan bases. It was fun, man. Like it was fun, and then they beat them, and it was a good game. No, it wasn't. It was an ugly game. I'm not gonna lie. It was a really ugly game, but you won it. So those are just kind of some of the big wins. I mean, if you have any more, please drop a comment. We can talk about it more. Like we'll do something. Like this is nostalgia time this off season. As recruiting's we're in a dead period. It's just kind of what it is right now. That's okay. As you can follow me on Twitter at PsychoZ50. Please follow me. I got insane ramblings, mostly about Mizzou basketball right now. As you're listening to Missouri Live, like and subscribe, guys. We're not going anywhere. But now let's get into the heart. What was easier? Like doing a top 10 of this would have been pretty easy. I just didn't want to depress myself. Toughest losses. Oh boy. The toughest losses. Like the losses, every Mizzou loss is tough. Every Mizzou loss is like, dang. These are the ones that hurt me to the core. Where I got emotional when they lost these games. Or I was so mad. I was just ticked. I was just mad. And number one, and we're just going to go year by year, and this is always going to be number one. Oklahoma 2007. The second time, Big 12 title game. You're number one in the country. You win the game. You're playing for the national championship. Sure, you're probably not going to beat LSU, or Ohio State. You might not even beat Ohio State, but you're in the national championship. No one can take that away from you forever. It's like TCU. Like TCU got hammered, but man, they got to say they played for a national freaking title. You can't take that away from the Horned Frogs. And it's 14-14 Mizzou, OU. Like Mizzou has some momentum going into halftime, and then they just fall apart. And OU crushes them. I didn't even watch most of the fourth quarter. I was 11, so I was in tears, man. I was crying. Like OU scored a touchdown to go up like 31-14 or something. I was just in tears. I was crying so hard. I was like, damn it, man. We played for a national championship. Oh, dang. Dude, I was so upset. 2008, not the Kansas loss. Actually, 2008 had a couple. Kansas loss was pretty brutal. They played like crap, and they still had an outside chance of a BCS game. And they played like crap, and then they fought back, and then they just lost it at the end. But the big one, that one was Oklahoma State. Like that Missouri team came into the season with national championship expectations, or national championship hopes. I wouldn't say expectations, or hopes of a BCS game and a Big 12 title. And they went to Nebraska, and they just beat the absolute piss out of the corn. Like that game was not close from the jump. And then they get to come home against Oklahoma State, and Chase has his worst game as a Tiger, throws 3 picks, and they lose, and the season's over. It's over. Like Oklahoma State was a pretty good team. Like Zach Robinson at that time. Like the Big 12 was just stacked. I mean, think about how stacked the Big 12 was at quarterback. You had Graham Harrell, you had Chase Daniel, you had Colt McCoy, Sam Bradford, and those are kind of the big four that everyone kind of remembers. If you're a college football fan, but like Todd Reesing at Kansas was really good. Zach Robinson at Oklahoma State was really fun to watch. Like he's the best ever fourth QB in his own division. Like he's got to be the best ever because he was an outstanding football player. Stephen McGee at A&M wasn't bad. Like there was a bunch of quarterbacks at that time that were really good, but you lost and your season was over. They went to Texas the next week. Like their hope was going to probably involve losing at Texas anyway, because I know Texas was coming off a rough 2007 for Texas at the time, but that was always going to be a tough one. And you finish with 3 losses and it's over. 2009, no loss. It was like guttural, like, oh my God. But 2010, you had 2, and this is what I was talking about with OU. Whoever scheduled this sucks. I hate them as a human being, but you have this huge homecoming win over OU. Massive. Field is stormed. You beat the number 1 team in the country. And then you got to go to Lincoln to play a really good Nebraska team off an emotional letdown. And the emotional letdown was always going to come. And you go there, and they got stomped. Roy Halou ran for like 7. I think Roy Halou is still running. They just got stomped. It wasn't even a game. They tried to mount a little comeback in the second half. It was never happening. They just got absolutely crushed. And you're like, well, they were undefeated. They were top 10 in the country. And again, Mizzou poops itself on the biggest stage. But they were still alive for the Big 12 crown. You know, Nebraska had won. I think Nebraska had lost to Texas at that point. And they were going to lose another game. So if you had just beaten Texas Tech and you went up 14-0 like that, and you let Seth, I think it was Seth Day at the time, come back and beat you, and now your season was over. Now you had no hopes for anything. 2011, the Arizona State loss was just super frustrating. That was not a fun loss at all. 2012, no, not really like any tough losses. Like they were annoying. Like the Vanderbilt game was really annoying. But like that team just was so injured and so not good that it didn't matter. 2013, South Carolina. Again, though, I want to reiterate, I think I've talked about that loss on the show. It didn't matter. Like as brutal as that loss was, and I think what helped is I think the Cardinals won Game 3 of the World Series that night. I think I was watching it as I left the stadium with my friend and my dad. But it wasn't. It didn't matter. Like, you still made the SEC championship game. If you had won the SEC championship, you would have played for the Natty. But, man, that was a tough one. You were up 17-0. Connor Shaw comes back and just kind of marches up and down the field on you. Brutal. 2014, I'm not going to just name every loss, but in the good seasons, it's hard not to think of, like, if you had just beaten Indiana – you just beaten Indiana, you would have been 11-1 again. You'd been 11-1 again, like back-to-back 11-1 seasons. Yeah, I know they got murdered by Georgia at home. I was at that game. That game wasn't frustrating. That game was funny because at that time we thought they stunk because they just lost Indiana and they beat South Carolina on the road, but South Carolina ended up not being that good. Like that was a 6-6 team. People forget about that. And then you came home against Georgia and you just got like that was not a game. That was a how many plays until something bad happens game. But the Indiana game, Nate Sudfeld. No, Nate Sudfeld seems like a decent guy. It was just ugly. I was there, like it felt like a game where because Mizzou had just beaten the crap out of UCF. Although they didn't destroy UCF. That game was pretty close for a while, but they destroyed Toledo. And then Indiana just kept hanging around, and it was like third quarter, and it's like, wow, they're still leading this. Mizzou goes up late, but Indiana came right back down and scored the go-ahead touchdown to win 30-27. It was just a weird day at Faurot. It was an early kick. Like the crowd never seemed to really get into it. Like even leaving, it didn't feel like it was real. It was just a weird game. I did not have fun. 2015, if you're going to go to the biggest loss, that loss to Kentucky just derailed everything. 16, they're no. 17, no. 18, there were two. The South Carolina game where you were in control in the third quarter. You were in control of that football game, and then you just let them come back and beat you. And the hard part was, at that time, we were hoping Barry Odom might be a decent coach. And he had already lost to Bama and Georgia, and it was like, okay, you lost to Bama and Georgia. It happens. But, man, you got outsmarted by Will Muschamp with a backup. That's what I was basically done with Barry. I was like, nope. And then Kentucky, where you couldn't move the ball at all in the second half, despite having Drew Lock, who, not a great NFL quarterback, but played in the NFL. You had Tyler Beatty, who played in the NFL. You have Larry Roundtree, who's gotten snaps in the NFL. You still had Demarie Crockett in the backfield. And you did piss all in the second half, and you lose. To a Kentucky team that was not very good that year. No, that was 2018 Kentucky. They did win 10 games. But still, you should have won that game. If you flip those results, you're 10-2, and maybe you're going to a BCS Bowl because you beat a top 15-ish Florida team on the road. But no, especially because at the end of the year, you smoked Tennessee on the road. You smoked Arkansas. Stupid. Good luck, Purdue. Well, hopefully he's gotten better. Old Barry. 2019, Wyoming. Like, again, Mizzou had all this momentum. You were returning a lot of good pieces off an 8-5 team. You brought in Kelly Bryant, who the thought was maybe not as good of an NFL prospect as Drew Lock, but certainly a good player. You had an easy schedule. Like, this past year's Mizzou team goes. You put 2024 Mizzou against that 2019 schedule. Oh, I'm trying to think. They might lose to Georgia. Maybe they lose to Florida at home. But that game's at home. Man, like they might go 10-2. At worst, they're 10-2, which is what they were this year. Or they went 9-3 this year. Worst, they go 10-2. At best, they're undefeated. Like that schedule stunk. You had Wyoming. You had West Virginia in year one under Neil Brown, who was awful. SEMO, bad South Carolina under Will Muschamp. Troy, Matt Luke, Ole Miss, so bad Ole Miss. Pre-Kiffin, you had Vandy with Derek Mason, who hadn't won a conference game. Kentucky playing a wide receiver at quarterback. That was the year Lynn Bowden somehow got him to 7 wins. Tennessee, when everyone thought kind of Pruitt was turning it around, but still. Trask, Florida was actually pretty good that year. And then Chad Morris, Arkansas. Like, the 2023 team goes – in 2019, Georgia was good, but they weren't great. Like, 2023 Mizzou smokes that schedule. And you went 6-6, and you lost an ugly, ugly game to Vanderbilt, and you lost an ugly game to Wyoming. You let Sean Chambers run all over you. And, yeah, not fun. That's when I was done with Barry. It didn't matter. They crept back into the top 25. I was done. No real ugly ones at 20, 21, or 22. Those were just kind of middling teams. Like, yeah, like the loss to Georgia and the loss to Kentucky stunk. Lost to Boston College stunk. But like these are like the losses that just piss you off. Like you're mad. Those losses were just kind of like, yeah, just not a good team. You know, hey, thanks for that was moral victory city right there in Columbia. In 2023, the loss to LSU. Like it didn't change anything about the season because if you go into Georgia and win, it just didn't change anything. But man, like you went up pretty big early, and then you're back and forth. They can't stop you, and you just can't get a stop. You had a bunch of NFL players on that defense, and you just could not get a stop. And I know Jaden Daniels won the Heisman, but man, frustrating. Last year, no tough, like no lot. Like the Texas A&M game was over in a quarter, so it was like, okay, Bama, they were never going to win that game. And South Carolina was brutal, but I don't think it changed anything. Like even at 10-2, Mizzou's probably not going to a very good bowl game for a team with a 10-2 record. So hard to be too tough about that. But yeah, no, think those were some. We can get more into those games. You guys, any more that reach the top of your head, but those games are the kind of the ones as I was going year by year thinking about like, yeah, no, that one sucked. Like if the team stinks, like there's no loss that's just going to tick you off. But those definitely, and unfortunately in the University of Missouri, there's more tough losses than good wins. Just when you think that Mizzou's peaking and on the come up, they do something stupid. The last thing I wanted to talk about, I can't type today. Does not help that my computer stinks. I was thinking about this the other day. We're seeing this Big Ten SEC thing, kind of collusion coming together, and we're seeing a lot of teams that are like I do think we're gonna see like a Big Ten SEC challenge. So more than just in the Big Ten, I'm trying to think of games I would love to see Mizzou play, home and homes, not neutral sites, but home and homes. I think that they don't already. I think the obvious one is Nebraska. I think we all want to see Mizzou play Nebraska again. Even if you don't think Nebraska is very good, and I think Nebraska's on the come up, I think their quarterback's too talented, and I think Matt Rule's too good of a coach. to not be on the come up. But it's a fun. It's kind of it's a rivalry. It's fun. Both teams hate each other. Nebraska will bring up their history. Mizzou will be like, "You made one bowl game in like 12 years. You suck. Shut up." I would like to see Mizzou's already got games scheduled against Kansas. They've already got games scheduled against Illinois. They just played Kansas State. I'm done with those guys. I'm done with them. I'd like to see them play Iowa State. I think that would be fun. I think that's more of a basketball rivalry than a football rivalry, but I still think it would be fun, and it should be two. No, I think it'd be good games because Matt Campbell's a really good coach. I'd love to see Mizzou play Iowa. I think Iowa, it's not a recruiting rival, but I think they're two games that would be super fun. Like, of course, I want to see Mizzou play home and homes against USC and Michigan, Notre Dame, those types of schools, but that's just probably not going to happen. So there are just some games I'd like to see Mizzou play against, whether it's regional rivals or former conference foes. Like they've got something scheduled with Colorado. I think that's super fun. We'll see if Deion's there. I'm just thinking around to like the ACC. There's just no program in the ACC I'd love to play. Like maybe North Carolina, just because of Belichick and Eli's ties to the state, and maybe you can recruit a little bit better out of there. There's no, and I've already gone through the Big 12. I said Iowa State and Colorado, but they've already got something scheduled with Colorado. Just because of the Eli thing, I'd like to see them play App State in a non-conference game. I know why they won't, because teams just don't want to schedule App State, which I hate, but at the same time, I get it. Because look, if you lose, it's embarrassing, and App State's good enough as a program to beat you. We'll see what happens as they move on to the future, but those are just some of the games. Nebraska, Colorado, they have something scheduled. Iowa State, Iowa. I'd love to see the Tigers schedule something with these teams, just because I'm tired. It's like Mizzou's non-con this year. Everyone's like, "Oh, it sucks." Okay, they're playing an FCS team, which everybody does that can. They're playing a pretty bad G5 team, UMass. Okay, I'll grant. They're basically playing two FCS teams. I will grant that. Louisiana's a pretty good they're playing a pretty good G5, and they're playing a Power 5 team. It's not Mizzou's fault that Kansas is awful and couldn't make a bowl game in a pretty mid-conference. They'll probably be better next year. We'll see what happens, but it's not Mizzou's fault that Kansas stinks. So those are the games I want to see, man. Like, what are we talking about? No spring game, so we'll be here, but man, do they make my job a lot tougher. You've watched Missouri Live. You can follow me on Twitter at PsychoZ50. The reason behind that is if you remember old college basketball, I used to be a huge Tyler Hansbrough fan. He was Psycho T. I was Psycho Z. Not nearly as good, though. Maybe. Shout out to Tyler Hansbrough. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Follow all our channels, guys. The Voice of College Football, we're on the way up, and we're really having fun with the ride. Thank you guys all for being here. We will be here next week with Mark Rogers to talk about his new book, and it's going to be a great time. So be sure to tune in next week, March 1st. Holy cow, next week is March 1st. As we continue this off season, I'm starting to miss it a little bit. Give me till May where I'm like, I could really use some college football right now. But I'm feeling the loss a little bit. Thank you guys all for being here, MIZ, and have a great week.